Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another podcast. So this one we got a special one here. We're here with Jeff Finnigan. We're going to be talking to him about his new position as Global Liaison. So before we get into that, just so you guys know, there was an audio issue that we didn't realize till later on. So the beginning part of the conversation we don't have, and so we're going to go through and recap his points and his thoughts because they were really cool and important things. So we'll go through that, and then you'll know because it'll suddenly transition and he'll suddenly pop up in the whatever corner here, and he will be here in person talking about all these things. But it's some really awesome stuff. And also just another random thing is when he does talk, occasionally his audio might go out and in. It's just an audio thing with background noise with his microphone, but it's not too bad. You can still get the gist of what he says. It doesn't happen too often. Yeah. So we'll jump into it real quick. So first, we asked him to explain what his position was, essentially. So if you guys aren't aware, he's the Global Liaison now. And so he said the reason it's global, not the U.S. liaison or something like that, is because they want to address all the communities, both Europe, Japan, Germany, anywhere that has a community he wants to address and basically communicate with and get feedback from the community funneled back to him and therefore the company and different things like that, and help basically track the game going forward. And he said bringing in things like data of what cards might be strong and all that, and improving that going forward.
And also like a communication point between the company and stores, he said, right? Or distributors, one of the two?
Yes. And then Oscar, you had a question for his... what was your first question?
My first question was about
spoilers.
Spoilers, and how I compared it to how Magic will select certain content creators and give them one single spoiler card, and then that content creator, whether it's a YouTube channel or a website, will spoil the card and it's exclusive to the website or whatever, and you go take a look at it. I did phrase it saying, understand if it's a no, but is that something that the company's ever considered? In which he had responded with, what did he say again?
he said he had brought it up as a possibility, I believe. I think one of the things he said that he wasn't too familiar with the content creators in Europe, right?
Right, to be fair, to be able to pick who all the content creators are across the world, because he doesn't have some sort of, like he said, book to know who all of them are. And then also it could be a dangerous thing to have, what would he call it, like a golden book or something? Of preferred creators, because it could be a dangerous thing. Which is understandable, because like in Magic, most of the content creators would get their cards, and like Alpha Investments doesn't get one, and sucks that not everybody can get one. And then he also had he said something else about it.
Yeah, he said that he liked the idea of it. He's watched Tolarian Academy. He watched
Community
LSV, Community. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so maybe although. Yeah, so so he thought it was I think he liked the idea, and then I think he has talked about it, but
it's something he might consider going forward.
He brought up one good point. I got super hyped on it about possibility of like product.
Oh yeah.
That's so cool.
About possibly giving out like how Jordan used to open up a booster box a little bit early, so you could see all the cards and different things like that. Similar to that, except they would send booster boxes to certain content creators to open up on their channel a little bit early so people could see that. And for obvious reasons, I think that is the greatest idea ever.
Oh yeah.
No biases.
The example he used was us. So yeah. I also like that you could tell he listens to our stuff. He knew that somebody here didn't like cancel spells, which is awesome.
To be fair, I think most people don't like cancel cards, and I was very clear that I like severing wins. I've always been very vocal that I've always liked severing wins. It's just certain other cancel cards, and also giving green every mechanic that's physically in the game. Anyways,
what was my question next?
But so
was that
Joey,
all of it?
Yes, that was all of that section. And then Joey, you had the question about the community.
Yeah, feedback. I think we pretty much covered most of his response, I believe. So I asked him, where are the main places you get your feedback from the community? Is it mainly from social media like Reddit and Facebook, or do you have a track on like local game stores? And to follow that, what kind of feedback helps the most? What do you respond to the most? And I really liked his answer. I don't know how much we got of it, but basically he said that that he mainly looks at kind of like a lot of the social media aspects. Mainly, like, he's very active on the Facebook US group, a lot of the Facebook groups. Apparently, he said that the Japanese section of their social medias has a lot of Twitter, so he's like a Japanese only Twitter account. I don't. Yeah. He listens to the Japanese Discord. I don't know if he ever said he listens to any of our like the US Discords or anything.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
Or at least occasionally.
Yeah, he said he's not very active on Reddit because he was he kind of grew up in the time of like 4chan and 2chan, and so he it sounds like he doesn't really browse the Reddit very much, but mainly from the US group.
But he did also add on to that he has somebody relay the information from Reddit to him.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Did he mention anything else?
It was asked what kind of feedback helps the most and what does he respond to the most, and he said feedback that not only just like, oh, I don't like this card, but explain why this card is bad, and like if this card is bad, like what like bad to the format, what things specifically about it would you do that would make it not as oppressive, things like that are actually constructive or have data to back them up. He really likes data, as you guys might see with his what's his website, Oscar?
I'm looking.
Yes, like
Joey.
yeah, well, something I really liked about that response is like it came from an obvious like teaching perspective. I think he had said that he is still a professor, and so when he gets feedback, he's not a fan of like the knee-jerk reactions and comments without evidence behind them. And I think that's like really, really important, because if you have like, you need to present your argument and then back it up with facts, reasons, and logic, and why these things support your argument, which is obviously that's what like you do in academics, and that's where he's coming from. And so I thought that was super interesting. I really liked when he said if you see a problem, what he wants to see is what is your solution or a possible solution to that problem, and why is it, why do you support that, and why might it be better than what they currently have. I think it's very interesting, and I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get out the whole answer, because I really, really like that part of it.
Yeah, his website's forceorigins.wordpress.com.
Yeah. No, hopefully, I really like all that conversation, so hopefully we'll be able to get him on again at a later time, because I'd be down to talk again about more stuff.
Yeah, I agree, and definitely to make it up for everybody listening who were probably hyped coming into this, listening to it, and to realize we missed that audio in the beginning, unfortunately. But till then, it's still pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah. Real quick, Oscar had a question about tokens.
Yeah, I said that I noticed that we had no token generation in Advent of the Demon King, and it's so far in spoilers for the next set, Time Spinning Witch, that we had no token generation. Last one was during Ancient Knights, and does this mean there's going to be no token generation going forward? And he said it's more of a balance thing. You'll see some coming in here and there, even though all the sets of Lapis clusters seem to have had, well, except for CMF. That's CMF. What's it called? Curse of the Frozen Casket didn't have any, but the starter decks did. But every set has had token generation, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. When did we end up coming back to his audio? Do we know like what question in particular?
Literally right now. I was about to transition over, Joey. So we had that question about tokens, and then continuing on the token thing, I had a question of any chance of us ever seeing tokens for the golem token generator or the wolves and pigs and all that, because I noticed we're missing those, and I like collecting tokens.
So, to be honest, not that I have heard. However, like as you may or may not know, all the tokens we've used so far are actually Valhalla cards that are the artwork at least.
Oh, okay.
And so it's, I think, a matter of, I don't think it was always necessarily like, oh, let's just use Valhalla cards because it's easier. But up until this point, I don't think we've had the kind of insight to be like, hey, we made these tokens. Let's go find a Valhalla picture.
Right.
It's just kind of been, it's worked in the past. The wolf tokens, etc. I haven't heard anything. It's not a no. It's not a yes. I think you would expect if we see a return to some of those tokens that we would likely want to make some kind of actual physical token as well. So that's the best I can say, and I'll be honest, I haven't heard anything either way regarding it.
Gotcha. Next question is going forward with the sort of with mixed feedback from the community. Do you think that Forceable will take the approach of banning cards or creating new cards to counter strong cards? And how would you deal with similar issues going forward that are sort of split in the middle of the community of like, should they ban it, or just like in the case of Pershal, or should they wait and try and print a Black Moonbeam, which is hit or miss and all that stuff? Like, what is that approach when the community is half and half on that type of issue?
So, all right, I'm super passionate on this topic, so forgive me if I start talking too long, and please interject if you ever have a comment. So my hope going forward, and I've really stressed this, is that up until now, when the company is designing these very strong threats, they're designing the answer, but we're not seeing the answer until a bit later on. So, for example, we saw Reflect Refrain, and we saw what it did, and then we didn't get Black Moonbeam until much later, which obviously was designed to help with him, as well as Ice Shackles, but we didn't get those cards until 3/ almost 4 sets later. And I think the big thing for me is that threats and answers need to be in the same set or very close to each other, because one of the things is that context is kind of relative, right? Like, it looks strong when there's nothing else around it, but as you're starting to see, even with Shahrazad, like, I kind of love her design because she's kind of the, if something gets too strong, she has all the sideboard cards to take care of some meta deck. And so her threat level, like her dolls that I think you guys have seen so far, they're reasonable, a little bit expensive, but her strongest point is always having access to answers, and to specifically tuned answers to whatever she might be playing against. And so, and we have, for example, Narlhotep got spoiled last week. There's your answer for Tree. If you want to do damage, like, if Tree is built around sacking all of its life for spells and not worrying about losing life, now all of a sudden you have Narlhotep, who on the second turn can be like, okay, I'm going to take your life out now.
Yeah.
So I love, my idea of a balance game is that the meta is essentially what is popular, and then the next week we can have the anti-popular deck, because you have all the tools to answer that. And then following that, maybe you have the anti of that deck. And so that kind of idea of, if you're familiar with Magic and kind of the pendulum swings both ways, that my idea of a healthy game is where the meta is shifting not by only what are the strongest cards, and for example, like, we've had some metas in the past where there was one deck that had no realistic answer, and it was just, yep, this is the deck you have to play, or the anti that deck, but it was just those two. And I'm at least of the belief that that's not a healthy format. Um, as far as how the company going forward is going to deal with that, number one, I'm very persistent in pushing for a healthy game, and as you might have seen on my website, and actually Ernesto helps me out as well, I track all the world tournaments, all of their data. Some of it I don't post to the website, but I keep track of that. And originally it was just for my website, but now I actually use that as well. Plus the European system has a huge data collection. And through that, like, when players recognize a problem, my goal is that we as a company now already know about it, and it's been on our watch list. And so, like, obviously we're not trying to be like Konami or something where we make a ban every single time, like, oh, new set, time to ban 8 cards. That is not the goal. And I've often talked about banning is basically like a surgery. You want to take away the least amount of things to balance the game. And there's arguments to be made that, okay, well then you're just continuously banning the next best thing. And I disagree with that, because the idea would be that eventually you get to an equilibrium where this is strong, but there's an answer to this. And I actually think after the Christmas banning that brought the EU list, Lapis 0 to Rhea 2 has actually been relatively healthy. We have 12 decks that show up in some capacity in top 8s, and I don't have the percentages off the top of my head, but of course Fair is the most popular, but it's also very straightforward and kind of, and this is not insulting anyone who plays Fair, but it's an easier deck that it's, if I Judgment on turn 2, it's not too hard to think I could steal a win. But there are, as we've seen, lots of good answers. Mikage is great. Hey, Joey. We have stuff like Lumia, who is a cool combo deck. There's Ayu, who, when not prepared for, gives like a right hook that's pretty mean. And so, and I even think that the key, like the critical turn for Welser is like 1 turn off right now. So, and obviously counterspells really hinder him. So like hitting a Majin Subjugation with any kind of counterspell hurts him next, because you're going down a card to essentially get some kind of advantage, i.e. tutoring from the deck and then plussing off that. But I do think that if the meta were to just slow down even a little bit, all of a sudden Panda's a viable ruler. There's a lot of talk about Gil being potentially very strong going into R3. So I do think that there is a equilibrium we can find, but then there's also the side of, like you guys talked about a little bit, fun. Like, the game has to be fun, right? This is a hobby, this is a game, we play it to be happy, to enjoy it, and from a kind of analysis perspective, if you divest a certain amount of time, not even divest, let's say invest, a lot of time into the game, the more time you put into it, the more concerned you are with the outcome. The reason you don't care when you lose in, like, I don't know if America has Tsum Tsum, but like the phone game, or like Bejeweled, or those kind of games, you don't care if you lose because you spent 1 minute, whatever. If you spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour on a Force of Will game, you're much more invested in the outcome. And it's been a big kind of push for me, is that experience needs to be enjoyable regardless of winning or losing. So the interaction has to be there, and it has to be enjoyable for players, so that even if, yeah, I know there's the spike players that their only goal is to win, and that's fine. But for the Johnny, the Timmy, the regular person, they want to be able to enjoy that experience, even if it's just, I played my weird panda creature that has a mustache, or I played my really cool mermaid, and like all of those things. Like, you want to be able to experience what your deck does, and then kind of have that feedback loop of, okay, well, I need this card, or I need something at this mana curve or will curve to play something appropriately that goes with the rest of my deck. And so I think finding a balance there is important. And it's easy to say fun is subjective, but in reality, I actually don't think it is. I think it's very objective, and I think there are ways to classify and quantify what fun is, and it's important that players understand themselves and what do they value. I've heard some very loud members of the community complaining about things, and I often try to ask them what it is that specifically they don't like, because it's very easy. I don't like this. Why? Why don't you like it? What part of the game is it not enabling you to do? Like, I know some people maybe in this chat don't particularly like really strong counter spells.
Wonder who that is.
And that's totally fine. And you know what? Like, I came from Magic for the last 20-something years, and like I play decks like Stasis and Stacks, which, if you're not familiar with, are decks that basically your opponent should concede rather than actually lose the game, just because it clogs up the board state to a point of, wow, this is terrible, I'd rather die. Finding a way where I can play something like that and it can be viable but not oppressive is, I think, kind of, I think that, for example, Seal of Wind and Light, that was a fair card. It was a hard counter spell, so like Zeke's and the one with Prisia's picture, I can never remember the name, but it countered a non-creature spell or destroyed a standby.
Yeah.
Keen sense.
Like, yes, Keen sense.
Yeah.
Like, I loved the Zeke's Keen Sense kind of. You didn't have a generic answer to everything, and then when we got Seal of Wind and Light, it was like, this card's strong, but it requires a specific mana or will combination, and it really did. Like, I don't know if you played Wonder too much, but there were certainly times when my stones didn't allow me to play Seal of Wind and Light, and it actually set me back a little bit. And so that's a design restriction, but because of that restriction, it allows us to make kind of stronger cards. And if you want to have Moon Will, which is not necessarily normal to have in a deck, then you got an even stronger version of the card. And I think that's a healthy kind of card. There's restrictions, but because of those restrictions, there's power in a different area. I think the design philosophy going forward is going to be more similar to that. I will say that there is the rest of Rhea Cluster is kind of designed under the old thinking, but with a little bit of Jeff touch to it to balance things out a bit. But as far as the new cluster goes, I'm incredibly adamant. I like strong effects, and I think we all like strong cards. That's fun. It feels good to play something strong, but it needs to have a counterpoint. Like, Welser is a very strong card, but his counterpoint is he has a lot of sacrificial things, so if those cards are countered, then he really loses card advantage. And right now the problem is something like the counter spells, as some people have talked about, are very difficult to play around, and essentially right now it's just the answer is stronger than the threat. That if a 1 mana, 1 answer is able to counter any 2 cards of any build combination, that is maybe pushed a little bit far for my taste. That's my personal taste. As far as the company goes, they're kind of deciding still. And I do think Dreams by itself, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it, I love Dreams by itself. It's really kind of, ooh, I sure hope I don't counter something big and they get a free card. Like, if you had to worry about Dreamsing a final battle and them cheating into play a huge creature early on, and you didn't have a free counterspell, you'd be like, oh, okay. Or something like the old invert cards, or not flip. that shift that you can play the backside of shift cards. So like the 10-drop Lumia, gave you the life back, and you could get your spell back. So like you countered my final battle. I'm gonna get all my life back and get my final battle back, and I have a 10/10. So ideas like that are fun, but I think, as I talked about before, the threat and the answers need to be on the same level. If one of them is outpacing the other, then we see imbalances. For example, the Mikage meta early on in Lapis Cluster. That was essentially due to, and actually into end of L4, we saw a lot of Mikage decks. We had so much removal. You guys remember Space Time?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. But that combination with Mikage and Demon Flame and all the other
Stealth Resonators.
Yep. It was basically, I'm going to kill everything you have, and then on the turn you're tapped out, I'm going to play lethal and kill you. And that was, again, where I think we had a couple too many answers. And at that time, the threats were good, but the problem was the best threat to their threat was the same threat. And so there was like the dad and mom package of reason. There was the celestial
Wing Seraph
and Satan or Lucifer, and so like there was that combination with Shion. Oh, I miss her. And so like there was kind of different win packages depending on what you needed, and I like that idea. I think it just needs to be balanced appropriately. You see right now we have a lot of synergy decks, like pandas are basically like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop kind of thing, and mermaids are kind of like card advantage, muck up the game a little bit, and now you've seen Giga Thunderfish. It's like, whoa! Don't let it swing or I lose. So just having that balance, I think, is very important. So just to kind of roll back a little bit, just the final thing is there needs to be a balance of threats and answers, and I think they need to be more closely put together. And I think now the company is monitoring the meta much closer than it ever has before. And so for all intents and purposes, like, yes, strong cards will exist, and if they do to such a capacity that if we ever see something like Reflect Refrain again, where all the decks in the top 8 are exactly the same, like, I will push as hard as I can to, like, emergency hit something like that. But outside of that, I want to let people have a chance to... It's fun to play with strong cards, but if things prove that they're too strong or that there's no answers, maybe they need to be removed. But then they can come back later if their answer becomes apparent. It's like, oh, okay, you can come back now. So I'm all for like a timeout ban list sometimes as well.
Yeah, like I don't. Well, obviously I have to follow the GPs and all that stuff, but yeah, my focus has always been like the local level, and like my fear is always like, even if there's an oppressive format and on the tournament level, that sucks, but like my biggest fear is like the local level, like when Reflect Refrain happened, how bad that hurt the game, and Prisha for a while there, it hurt, especially like we saw it in our locals as well, people not wanting to play anymore. So that's always been my biggest concern, not like, because people point out like, oh, just play deck the counter in the tournament and stuff like that, and it's like, that doesn't help my locals. I can't tell people that, you know.
And when that, to me, is the ultimate, like, if the meta or the cards themselves are preventing people from wanting to play our game, that's a problem. That is the number one problem. That's why, like, I play locals every single week as long as my girlfriend gives me permission. And, and I basically play mono, the other players might call mono jank. Like I love to just I play Via 4, I play Shebe, I play Kirk, I play like I play Lumia, I'll play Fair. Like it's important to understand the good decks and know why they're good and understand how they work. But like I think for me and at a local level, I'm interested in having a good experience. I really try to push that, and like whether it be a first time player getting some extra promos or whatever it may be, like I want them being players at the local level to enjoy playing the game. Actually, and I've said this since I started playing, that I think Force of Will is actually the most fun at a slightly under tournament level. Like there's always going to be in every game, like the top tier decks are going to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
But right underneath that is like a super healthy, really fun game to be played with lots of interaction, lots of different like themes that are really powerful. And we're actually at a point where we're almost there. I think the biggest difference you see is that the top tier decks have the highest will efficiency in their cards. That's why you see a lot of like 3-4 color good stuff decks sometimes. And like, I mean, you guys know right now there's decks that are 20 cards that are all the same top tier decks, and then it's kind of that ruler's flavor. And that's we've always looked at metas as far as what the ruler is, how healthy is the meta, and in that regard it's super healthy. But there's also a kind of thematic difference, and right now it's very samey feeling, and that's why some people don't enjoy that. As if locals, it feels like the decks are all the same, even if their game plans are different. And so I absolutely agree. Like when the game gets to a point where locals are not fun, that is the problem. And so that's why I joke with my girlfriend sometimes that it's very important that I go to locals and play. And so, like, when I used to play locals and I would play against Priscia and the regaliaed version and even the unregaliaed version, I was just like, wow, it is fun. I'm dead, right? I have a stone, a single stone. So my sacred elf is very strong, but thanks for doing 4,000 damage in the air. That was fun.
That's why I always joke about like the last year's GP that we went to that had Priscia OTK, and like me doing a game where I literally he J-activated and I killed Priscia 4 times in a row, but because of Levitating in Spanish and he kept having it in hand, just being able to come back and it's like, I don't know what to do beyond this point. I did all the right things.
Like I do know, like the first time you ever got to like I forget what it was, Soul's Tutor or whatever, the card that Ancient Magic lets you search for Ancient Magic, and the first time you Black Moonbeamed when they weren't ready for it, it was like, okay, they just scoop and go to game 2. But then after that, it was just like, this is a like battle utility, and it's just like, what the heck? And the defining point for me was I loved, and if you look back far enough, I loved Arla combo, and on the turn it went off, it was very strong, but that was at the fastest, like with no protection, maybe like a turn 3. And with, I mean, there were games where I had all 10 stones out and I would make sure that I had enough. I'm okay with that kind of setup, but when I was getting, like, turn 2'd by an aggro deck, it was not only, like, the Arla combo was, like, all in on the stone kill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're gonna Tama somebody to death, you're like, I'm gonna deck out before you kill me, alright? But to have a deck that also had aggro, that had this, okay, you killed my OTK. At the time, I still have Imperishable. I still have Mariabella, who is no slouch with flying swiftness and the ability to do all kinds of shenanigans. Like, there was just so much there. And so I myself was like, this isn't fun. I wasn't working for the company then, but I was just like, this isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. And I think then it became, why is it not fun, right? And it's too fast. It's not interactable. Only one ruler can realistically stop it. At the time, it was Papa. And then once the list started slowing down just a little bit and going like with the what was it? The spinning the myths.
Yeah.
So spinning myths, or what was the other variant of it? Oh, Jack and Jill, or Jack the Beanstalk, and Giant. Like, there was all these versions, and it was just like, no matter what you do, there was just nothing that could deal with it. And then Fox came out, and it was like, oh, okay, well, the only deck that beats Prisia is Fox, and all anti-Fox decks get destroyed by Prisia. And so that was an unhealthy balance, and I'm glad we adopted the ban list as it is. And Hook was just kind of in the... I've made a mention that as far as if Lumia exists, we have to be okay with any enter effect happening every single turn for the rest of the game. And as it turns out, not having any stones, not one of those abilities.
Did you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. How much like I guess pull or say do you have for like balancing issues? Like, if you go to developers or people who are working on that, and you say like, hey, this is too strong. Like, I'm gonna recommend this. How much how much feedback do they take from you and implement?
So, hopefully none of them watch this. So, the team is very Japanese, and so there is some amount of foreigner-ness, gaijin-ness that is there. So there's a certain amount of, okay, shush. But I think the biggest thing that it comes down to is, and this is the unrefutable side, is, and Magic has had this too, Konami, etc. When it starts affecting sales, then it has to be that way. And they actually have been very responsive as far as going into the new cluster. We've already talked about kind of implementing checks to some of the power level in ways to make sure that things don't kind of... I've essentially said this to the design team. Continue design, because would you guys agree? The design balancing side, mechanics of Force of Will are super fun. The game itself is incredibly fun. It's just the tweaking of the knobs that maybe needs to be balanced to some extent. Mm-hmm. Like, I've always said, like, you want to get players to play Force of Will, let them play the game. Like, they'll probably enjoy it. And so as far as my polls, how the company works is I report directly to, and so then the Japanese team is kind of the design team and all that is a kind of different area, but they're willing to listen, and because for so long they have only really known kind of what the Japanese players have wanted and what that's popular there. So I've kind of tried to bring it to their attention, and of course Jordan the past, but I'm in a kind of different position where, and as I said, I like data, so I can prove what I'm talking about and then show them this is how it can be done. Now, that is not to say I am a designer. Like, a lot of players think they can design, and I don't think they truly understand, like, matching thematic and card flavor and power level. And that's very difficult. And I'll be honest, it's much easier to twist the knobs after they already made the picture than it is to make the pictures. I've said, you guys do you make as much or as little as you want as far as power level with these guidelines, and then R&D and I get kind of a final look to going forward. Like, let's just say I'm not going to be like, okay, Regalia were a good idea. At least cost. And players too, actually, this is a really good thought experiment. I talked about this in one of my posts, but it's a really good idea for players to really talk about how would we balance a card. Take something broken that you think in the game is like, Jesus, how did this get printed? And then decide how you would balance that card and then justify those balances. And it's actually a really good creative process to think about how to go about actually R&Ding. And then multiply it by 150 and do
How much do you guys like playtest? And
so
kind of who playtests, I guess, too.
The who I cannot say. The how much we basically throughout the set's inception to design to essentially till the actually even after the translations are done. Like for example, so we've been playtesting R3, of course, but we're still playtesting R3 just because. So one useful aspect is that we have to not only consider what is coming, but of course what is in the past, right? And I think that's been a issue in the past, was like, what about interaction with cards? And so the idea is kind of making a gauntlet. And so the easy thing to do that a lot of players talk about is, okay, well, we're just going to take new cards, put them into our old deck, and then how does it work? But we also have to figure out what are the new decks you're going to make and how are those going to play. And so, like, to this day, like, we're still playtesting for and yeah, we have a watch list, or I have a watch list at least. And so we have expectations or a theory craft, and lots of players are talking about it, and that's one piece of it. And it's just, you guys know, sometimes what we think isn't actually our reality of what comes to be, and it might just be what's popular. It might be playability. Some decks are easier than others to play. There's nothing wrong with that, and that does affect people. So if there's a very high skill cap, but the ability of that deck is very high, then that's okay. If a less skilled player does not achieve the same results, then it's maybe safer. But if it's ease to play, i.e. Prisia, plus the kind of, what is the cost ratio to winning? If very easy to play and very easy to win, that starts to get dangerous. And so you kind of want that balance of complexity. You're rewarded for your skill, but also there's options available that are easy to play, and you can get wins, but not necessarily always. And decks that reward complex trees of decision making that maybe have a little bit higher win ratios, that's okay. But those need to be taken into account, and I'm a big stickler for, we can play test and we can predict certain things. Like, I joined the company during kind of after R3 had already been sent to B print, and I just like, oh, green's really strong still. But there was nothing to be done, but I just said, we need to watch it. And so that's going forward, that's what we're doing. We're watching. And if it proves to kind of pass our definition of healthy, then we'll act on that. And that's the biggest change kind of going forward, and I hope to, even speaking to you guys, to kind of make you feel more comfortable, is now there is someone watching and taking care. And if, like, one tournament is not proof, but 5-6 tournaments across the world and the best minds thinking about it, and if there is nothing that can deal with it, then it's time for the company to step in. But in that meantime, there's kind of that balance. And so we play test quite a lot. But my last justification will be that there's no way that our team, regardless of their size, could ever match the playtesting of thousands of players all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I mean, realistic. I can play, let's say, if we spend, and this is not how it works, but let's say if I go to the office and I play 8 hours straight of games, I get nothing else done for the actual company, just playing the game. I can play, what, maybe 8, 9 rounds, and like even if we have a team of people doing that, that's still nothing compared to the world playtesting on a huge scale, and all the professionals he's talking, all the casuals. Just the manpower is so imbalanced, and I will say we have a good team, but there is just it's easy retroactively to be like, what the hell, how didn't they see this? It's another thing to design not only with what decks currently are, but what we expect in the future to be as well. So that's kind of what I can talk about as far as playtesting.
Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I talk too much, but here, let me just double check real quick.
Oh yeah.
And, all right. He sent me a message. I'm ready. All right, here. I got a couple more minutes. I'll just.
You do a speed round.
Yeah. We'll do some speed answers. All right.
All right. These are the Patreon submitted questions.
Oh, just start with those.
So, what is your opinion on posting and discussing leaked cards?
So as a player, I always liked teasing, like if I got them early. However, I never liked actually showing the cards. I think this is me personally. Companies design their their preview schedule with a certain philosophy in mind, and so when cards get leaked, it kind of messes up the order that players are supposed to see cards in, and so it can affect how players look at new cards. And so I don't particularly like them as far as breaking street date goes, because it really messes with kind of the experience, the user experience that we want players to have. And so those leaks kind of damage that. And I do know people are hungry for information. They want anything they can get. But I do think it hurts the presentation of a new set when things are leaked in the wrong order.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Do you have is there any chance, and if so, when Forceable would update or improve the U.S. website, maybe putting it more in line with something like the Italian site?
Coming real soon. You're going to find out within probably the next month or so, there'll be at least an update about something about that, and you should expect, hopefully by the end of this year, at the very latest, we'll have a new website, because
awesome.
Specifically for the U.S. too, not just the international page.
That's awesome. Okay, so you went over that. How do we as players grow this card game when local game stores might be removing support? How do you combat that? So
the biggest thing, honestly, realistically, you gotta go to your card shop, and you can't buy your cards online, because strictly as a business, and that's what your LGSs are, they want to make money. And I know that in the US especially, because the distributors sell to online shops much more than even anywhere else in the world outside of maybe Japan. So the box prices in Japan or in the US are the lowest of anywhere in the world, which is cool, but it hurts your LGS if you're not buying from them. And so we're trying to, from our end, to promote kind of reasons to go to your LGS and to help them out by having kind of exclusive things that only go to LGSs. The side that players can do, and there's something coming soon that is going to push kind of for LGSs. I can't talk more about it until the article, but it's coming. But players, even right now, the biggest thing you can do is actually buying cards from your local game shop. And that goes in as far for local game shops. What you can do is sell singles that a lot of players maybe don't have the disposable income to buy entire boxes necessarily right away, especially if they're not sure about the game. And so it helps immensely to new players. If LGS even opened up a single box to have some singles available to new players, because it's really tough if you want to build a new deck or even an older deck, and maybe you need a card, and maybe the players have it, but your LGS isn't making money off of you buying or selling from other players. And so if the game is to grow in your local communities, part of that is supporting the local community. And like, for example, in Tokyo, where I go to play every weekend, as you may know, Fireball went out of business last year, maybe 2 years ago, a year ago, can't exactly remember. But the rent in Tokyo is insane. But we had another shop pick up Forceable, and now actually a couple more shops have as well. And what has really pushed them to start supporting the game more is people buying boxes from them, people buying singles from them. They've been able to move product, and so the stores feel more comfortable to support the game. And I think that's the big issue, is because the US has kind of a problem, so to speak, of the online retailers undercutting everybody else. There's no reason to buy from your local game shop. My local game shop supported the game until it got big enough that the online shops were selling for less. He couldn't compete. People stopped buying packs from him, and then he was like, okay, we're not going to do it anymore. And people weren't playing because they were just buying the cards and getting sent to their house and then playing with each other and going to GPs. They weren't actually playing locals. So the biggest thing you can do to help your local community is get your cards from your local community.
All right, I think that's a good thing to end on. Unless Oscar or Joy had any last thoughts or anything.
I think we're good.
Yeah, I'm good. This has been great.
Yeah, no, that was a great insight and all that.
I apologize. I talk too much always.
It's all good.
It's
been fascinating.
Better than us talking. Awesome. Thanks a lot for coming by, and I'm sure a lot of people are
thank you.
pretty excited about this going forward, and a lot of especially this new direction that the company has taken post December and all that. So I'm looking forward for everything going forward.
Good. I hope you guys enjoy what we have in store, and I would just ask for the people that are like, why is green still strong? What's going on? Please understand that design does not necessarily work as fast as we as a company can change what's already been done. And so there is a transitional period, and I just ask for kind of their patience to all players and to LGS, etc., that change is coming in a direct way. We've already kind of made our stake in the sand as far as where we hope to get to, and so now it's the transitionary period. And I just ask that people be patient, and we do all that we can do as a company, and players to just be patient and enjoy the game that we have and look to the future. And I've kind of said this many times, but there's good things coming. There's good things now, but be excited for lots of good things to come.
That sounds good to me.
That sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Wonderful day.
Have a good night.
You too.
Oh yeah.